Welcome to the Sexy Freedom Media Podcast, a place to discuss pain, passion, and pursuits.
Let's get it. I want to feel alive.
Breathe.
Make some moves.
Protect the throne. This is Sexy Freedom Media Podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to the Sexy Freedom Media Podcast. It's your host, Helen Edwards, and
January Liddell. Aloha.
And our returning residential doctor, Gretchen Gavero. Welcome, Gretchen.
Thank you for having me back.
Yeah, today we are talking about aging minds, thriving, not just surviving. This is really important, especially for those of us who are starting to feel the aging process. And we put out a few fillers in our Sexy, Successful, and Soul-Fed group, and also on our Facebook pages. We wanted to ask our audience for some questions that we can ask you that were concerning them as well as far as the aging process goes. So let's just jump into our first question.
What are some of the tools we can use as we age to be more alert with more sound mind?
Yes, very common question. Based on the questions we gathered, actually, I combined that with two other questions that came out from that. So the three questions altogether were, in addition to that first question, there were two other questions related. How can we prevent forgetfulness and improve memory as we age? And the other one is, what are the best exercises and supplements for our brain as we age? So I guess we'll start off with just focusing on the brain and the mind. Yeah. And so this has to do with, as we age, we're thinking about maintaining alertness, trying not to be as forgetful, and really improving memory. And, I wish I could say something magical that's like new, but a lot of the things really point to basic healthy lifestyle. So we'll start with those. First really is our balanced diet, our adequate sleep, make sure we're having like 7 or 8 hours of sleep, and then avoiding substances like alcohol, drugs, especially smoking, because they do have impact on our physical health. So the main theme across all of our podcasts with me is still remembering that when we think of our brain, that's related to, our brain is an organ. It's a body part, so it's related to the rest of our body. So we can't just think of like memory as the brain, but how it relates to the rest of the body. In addition to that list of healthy lifestyle, the main thing that I want to emphasize actually is physical exercise, just because there's so much research about regular exercise, consistent regular physical exercise, and brain health. So if we do our few minutes a day of moderate physical activity, even if it's like gardening or walking or doing house chores, it really lowers the risk of declining cognition or brain problems. That's memory and learning. There's a very particular part of the brain, so I'm going to get just a tiny bit sciencey here. There's a part of the brain called our hippocampus, and the main purpose of this part of the brain really is memory and learning. And as we age, there's not many parts of the brain where we grow new brain cells, but hippocampus is one of those areas. And research has shown that if we are engaged in consistent physical exercise, we actually enhance the growth of new brain cells in that area, which is great. That means that rather than shrinking in size or lowering in activity as we age, with physical exercise, that part of the brain, our hippocampus, actually increases in size and increases activity, which is great. So hippocampus plays a very big role in forming memories, including sequencing of events, like the timeline of our experiences, and encoding the emotions that are part of that experience. So that is very, very important when it comes to just taking in our experiences, right? And also in learning. So regular exercise, specifically aerobic exercise, where you increases your heart rate a bit. It's been shown that you have increase in nerve cells or brain cells, and increase in increase in size. And the main thing here is being consistent rather than sporadic type of exercise, just whenever we feel like it. So aerobic exercise is very important. Resistance training, meaning when we're doing a little bit of weight, especially like grip kinds of training, there's research that also shows that that's helpful in slowing the progression to something like dementia. So for me, that's very important because all of my grandparents developed dementia when they aged, and some have passed due to complications of dementia. So I have to be on top of that because genetically I'm at risk. Then when it comes to other brain stuff would be mind-body exercises, things that increases our concentration, our focus, like meditation, yoga, those types of exercises can be important. Last is complex motor skills types of exercises where you're doing different movements and different hand movements, can be important too. Now, the other types of exercise other than physical exercise would be like exercises that stimulates our thinking, our cognition. So now we're going into things like brain teasers, like crossword puzzles and other brain games that we maybe have on our phone. Yeah. Next, oh gosh, there's so many, but I'm going to go through just a couple more. I mentioned for hippocampus, there's the part about, there's the memory part, but there's also the learning part. So if we think about fun ways to enhance our brain health, it's really engaging in an activity where we're learning. So it could be reading something new. I love online courses, so looking at online courses. It could also be learning an instrument, engaging in hobbies. So we talked about the memory, and the next one is learning. And keep in mind, this is not just for young folks or middle-aged folks. This is all age. And I'm specifically also preaching to our grandparents and our parents because the nerve cells, and in the past we thought that our brain cells stop growing when you're young, and research has now shown that that's actually not true. And there's actually specifically two parts of the brain. I mentioned the hippocampus where new brain cells can grow, and the other part is actually in your olfactory or smelling system. And going back to the learning, if we are using our senses when we're learning, that enhances brain cell growth, which is great. Yeah, it enhances the growth in our olfactory bulb, which is a nerve area in our smelling nervous system, and also in our memory center, our hippocampus. So when you're using your senses when you're learning, that's helpful. It enhances, again, those memory formation and brain cell formation. Engaging in new hobbies, engaging in new skills can challenge the brain and can stimulate that brain growth and really reinforce your reserve in your cognition or thinking. Something that is also common as you age is actually hearing loss. Now, for me, I'm not that old, but I actually have hearing loss on my left ear because of an injury. So if you think about it, we use our senses so much in just taking in all of the information in the world, like learning too. So if I'm doing online courses, it's important for me to hear, what I'm learning. But if I don't take care of this hearing loss, and if our older population are not taking care of their hearing loss, once that happens as you age, like not using hearing aids or not getting that checked out, then you're not as engaged or excited about the things around you. So it's very important that you treat age-related or injury-related, anything related to hearing loss. We talked about brain teasers or stimulating exercises that stimulate our thinking. So those are the puzzles, the Sudoku that you like to use on your phone. There's also supplements that are helpful in supporting our brain health. So those are our omega-3s and certain vitamins, specifically B vitamins, because they're helpful for concentration and focus. Now, when it comes to supplements, though, there is no supplements are as they are. They are called supplements because they are just there to supplement everything else that is foundation to brain health, which is our diet, exercise, and my area of expertise, which is taking care of your mental health. It is such an important part of brain health. So when you take when we take care of mental health, that includes, stress management, for example. When we're able to regulate your emotions and calm your nervous system when you're stressed out. Yeah. That's important in your brain health because if you remember, one of the one of the main symptoms for depression and anxiety is problems in focus and concentration. That's directly related to our brains. And so if we're doing habits that are preventing these psychiatric or mental health conditions, then you're taking care of your brain. So our emotional health is important. Organizational tools are important. Now, this is super important, not just for busy people, but also for our elders, our aging population. Our brain wants to conserve energy. And so if we can save energy by having routine information like things on the schedule or appointments on the calendar, or something where you can just look at and see, oh, I wrote that down, my grocery list. Then you're lowering the mental energy required to recall that information. You can use your energy to do other things like in learning and connecting to people.
I
So
feel like what you just answered, you actually also answered the question that somebody asked, where they said, is there a correlation between exercising and aging, and would exercise help us age gracefully? I guess the answer would be yes, then, correct?
yes, yes, and yes. I have that. Oh my goodness. And I have that down the line for the question to answer too, because it'll bring us full circle. Because right now we're focusing on the brain, right? But if we think about, even if we just think about how do I take care of my brain, it really is a holistic approach. And taking care of your brain involves all the habits that we need to take care of the rest of our body. So when it comes, if we jump into that question, for example, should we go to that question? Okay. If we look at research, it supports this 1,000% exercise. So exercise is something that I write on every prescription. Like if you read my medical notes on the plan section, it says exercise regularly. So when I was thinking about this question, we have to think about, what does aging gracefully mean? Right? Because for some people, it might mean, oh, I want to look youthful, nice skin, physically. I guess many people think of it that way. Um, for me, I think of it as aging gracefully, body, mind, and soul. Aging, like physically being, having a strong immunity, having physical strength, having good skin is something I think about. I think about too. And then psychologically healthy too, meaning as I age, I want to continue to be joyful, having like a deep sense of like myself, having peace and purpose and feelings of gratitude and feeling connected. And, physical exercise. Physical exercise supports all of that because we know the benefits of exercise, both in the physical health and our mental health. So if we look at physically, exercise, it strengthens our immunity. So especially if you do get your heart rate up and you do it regularly, it it maintains your immunity as you get old, as if your biological age is lower. So similar to younger people. So and then if we think about it, why is that? Because regular exercise is a key, it's so essential in preventing age-related conditions like heart disease, diabetes. These are so common, even dementia. Right? We know that exercise helps slow the progression of dementia. For women, osteoporosis, like our bones get fragile as we age, but exercise, especially weight-bearing exercise, support that.
As women, and we're talking about aging gracefully. Would you suggest that right now in our 40s is really a great time to start aging gracefully? And there's a caveat to that question. What about those that are not 40? What about those that are already in their 70s and 80s? I know one of the questions that my auntie has, my dad has, is energy and forgetfulness. Those are the two things that are quite common in those that I've talked to who are in their senior citizen phase. And the question of, because I know we talked about it earlier, is that our brain cells continue to grow. So that is a common thing. Jim Quick has mentioned that in some of his trainings, and Jim Quick is an he is a guru. He is a coach, educational coach. He's great. So if you ever get a chance to check him out, he's on Instagram, Jim Quick, and he did mention that brain cells continue to grow as long as we continue to use our brain, as long as we
Yes.
continue to exercise, because there's physical exercise, but there's also mental exercise. So with that question as of us aging gracefully and starting now in our 40s, what about those that are in their 70s and 80s? How can we increase their memory and how can we increase their energy?
Yes. And so if you're in your 70s and 80s, we're not saying we're changing memory back to when you were 20s, right? What we want to do is we want to preserve what we have and continue to reinforce the skills that will help us remember. And so not any different from what was said earlier, which is engaging. So as far as the memory, like engaging in tools that will help us remember. That's one. Now, if you add mental health to that, because there was a question about memory earlier, right? About trauma and remembering memories, and so we'll talk about that next, I guess. We remember things. We remember certain things if we're in a similar state, and so if you are wanting to remember like past stuff, for example, or family members or events, great thing with technology now is that we have lots of pictures and videos and everything. Get back to those if you want to exercise that part of your brain to remember the emotions and the experiences, positive ones, right? Because those are the ones that support your mental health. Engaging in social connection is very, very important, especially for our aging population, because loneliness and isolation are common issues in this population. Our kids get older, they do their own stuff, and then we're for my family at least, we're all in different parts of the world or parts of Hawaii or parts of the US. And so isolation and loneliness can be an issue. And so maintaining that social connection actually is very important to enhance memory. And when you're socially connected, you feel good. And when you feel good, you feel energized. So that emotional part is so important. And then the physical part is, yes, the gentle walking, the we cannot be sedentary. We've known that for hundreds of years, right? We cannot just sit on the couch and not do anything. So even as you age, even with, let's say it's someone with functional limitations, there's still certain movements and gentle exercises that can be done. Like Tai Chi, for example, is so great because it's not just good for functional movement, but it's also calming and kind of meditative. And last thing about aging too, if we want to really get into some of the deep science about it, and this is relevant for all of us, especially for people our age, like actually for everyone, is that this physical exercise has been shown um, to preserve cell death or cell death arrest. And for example, in our DNA or chromosomes, we have these things called telomeres or telomeres. And that part of our DNA it's kind of like a protective cap. Yeah. It's if you have like a strand of DNA or chromosome, and these are what holds on to our genes that make us who we are. Yeah. The end of those strands have certain caps that get shorter as we age, these caps. But with research shows that when you exercise regularly, that shortening of that cap actually slows down. And which is good because when that cap shortens, that's directly related to our biological age. So someone who regularly exercises, and again, not just physical exercise, but like let's say healthy lifestyle in general, right? Plus exercise, they could be in their 50s and 60s and 60s, 70s, but they're maybe like 9 or 10 years plus younger because of that. So that's really cool, right? So it's not just out of the blue, it's not just what we see on the outside, but like on a on a body cellular level, something is really happening when we exercise.
So I do want to share. I've been doing
Yeah.
bar and I love bar.
Yeah.
Bar is very gentle and it's very graceful, but it also uses weights. And so that's something that I'm enjoying. I'm on day 15. So it's been really nice that I can tell that I feel stronger. So not only is exercise consistently, and Helen is so great at this because she exercises all the time. And I'm just now getting into that consistency phase, but I do see the benefits of doing exercising every day, pretty much every day. I probably have one rest day. But it's definitely a habit that you have to actually form. So that is the one thing that I'm learning as I grow older, is that it's really all about consistency and mind, body, soul. I mean, that I love that you said that, Gretchen, because you're absolutely right. Everything is aligned, with everything. Like we can't just focus on exercise and that's it, but we also have to focus on our eating and also our mental. I feel like our mental is really where everything is at, is that's the battleground, is our mental. Because once we can hone in on what's in our brain, because I feel like that's what stops us from exercising a lot of the times, or even moving. I can tell with some people some elderly that I've seen, is that they like to just sit still. And that's the issue of energy, I feel, is that it's so funny. It's like there's no energy, but yet if this person was exercising consistently, then she would have more energy. So thank you.
You-
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, when I was on the plane, because I was traveling recently, I was writing down what are my must-haves, like about just like life, you know. And from my brain as a psychiatrist, and the number one thing I put was energy, because really I can't do anything without that. I can't plan my goals, I can't plan for this podcast, I can't exercise without energy. And so you're right, it's like a circle, chicken or egg, which one comes first, mental health or energy, or energy or mental health? It's really both, right? That's why as we're talking about all of these, I know that many people are probably, okay, gotta exercise this way, I gotta eat this way, I gotta take this supplement. But it doesn't have to be complicated. It can be if you want it to be, but we always have to start with the basics, and that is thinking that you can do it, one, and that you want to do it, because that will at least give you a little bit of energy. Have you had those days where you wake up and you're like, I don't want to do anything, but then when you remember, but I have to because I want to, and it'll make me happy. You get just a little bit of boost, and then you start moving. And once you start moving, your body knows that, all right, it's going to wake up, it's time. And so you really have to pair that body and mind to do anything in life, I believe.
I think one of the things that has always motivated me to work out, and this is going to sound so silly, but I love zombie and vampire movies. So I'm always talking about the
I do
apocalypse.
too.
I I always tell my husband and my sisters, if the zombie apocalypse happened, I need to be ready. And I mean, we don't know what's going to happen in the world, and I grew up watching Red Dawn, so I'm always thinking of a warrior type mindset. And a warrior type mindset is always training, always ready. And I always think of when I watch the zombie movies, like, am I going to be the woman who fell because she couldn't take care of herself? And I'm causing everybody else to fight for me. And I'm holding out one arm and like, don't leave me. Like, I cannot be that person. I can't. I have to be the one. I have to be the one who carries the big stick and is like, I got you all, like, run. I want to be the hero of my own story, and possibly everybody else's story if we do have a zombie apocalypse. So, and I don't want to say, oh, I can't because of my age. So I'm always thinking about that type of mindset. So that's kind of one of the biggest motivators behind behind always trying to like work out and everything. But I really loved what you said about, what came first, the mindset or energy, because it's true. When I wake up and I don't have energy that day, it has it's
It's
what?
like it's like a domino effect where
Yes.
you're not feeling it, and then then you don't want to do this, then this doesn't happen. And yes, totally understand.
Yes. So I wake up and I sometimes don't have the energy. And sometimes I say, okay, I have grace on myself. I'll go back to sleep and take a nap. But like you said, Gretchen, I think of, I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. And I know if I listen to that voice instead of the one that says, I'm tired, I just say, try one thing, just one thing, even if it's just getting up and doing like 10 minutes of a workout, if it's just getting up and doing no workouts, but cleaning or doing the laundry or washing the dishes or getting up and just going outside and letting the sun feed you that vitamin D for this morning. Like it's just the let's get to the next step. Let's get to the next step. And the next thing you know, you've had a full day of progress over perfection and you feel good about yourself.
Yeah, that attitude is so important when it comes to aging too, right? Because um, if I imagine myself in my 70s and I'm thinking, oh, I'm in my 70s, or I'm losing my memory, if I'm focusing on that, that will make me feel down. And if I'm down, I can't do the things that I need to do to support my brain so that my memory increases and my energy increases. And so, yes, the mindset is very important. Like our bodies will age. We'll have our wrinkles. We'll lose some of our memory. It's part of the natural process. But we can't spend all of our energy worrying about that because the worrying itself is counterproductive. It speeds up, the losing the memory. Better use that energy again in learning and doing the things that will support our brain.
That leads us to another question, and that question was brought up by another listener. Do we ever get our memories back if they are lost during trauma and or abuse?
I love this question because the answer is not as simple because when we think of trauma or abuse, there's a whole spectrum. Something minor can feel very big to someone, and something big can feel nothing to someone else. So the main point here, the things that I'm going to say, remember that it has to be it varies for every person because we all have different brains, different perspectives, and different cultures. Um, but if let's focus on like how the brain works and how memory works. So some concepts, the main answer is if it's due memories, if they're lost because of trauma or abuse type of experience, it can be you can recover it, but the process on how to recover it and how much you can recover can be different for each person. Yes. Again, because of different brains and different experiences. So some concepts to review. When you learn something or you experience something, that information gets encoded in the brain based on the specific state of your consciousness, like in that moment. And that state, it's influenced by multiple things, like how you feel emotionally, how you feel physically, your environment. Yeah. That's why PTSD makes sense, right? If you can get triggered based on similar situations. So for us to recall our memories, your brain almost has to be in a similar state if you want the most accurate. If the state is different, it's going to be harder to access those memories. For example, like it's like an extreme example. If you're trying to learn something when you're drunk and you memorize it, and then you try to recall it when you're sober, it's harder. But if you get drunk again, you probably like remember what you tried to memorize at that time. Yeah. I'm not endorsing, to drug. It's just an example. But vice versa, if you're sober and then you're trying to remember something while you're intoxicated, it's not really going to happen. So we call that state dependent learning, and that's very important. It's an important concept to just understand to answer this question. So because in trauma, that experience is encoded based on what was happening at that time. And so because it's painful or related to suffering and hurt, your brain might encode that information in a way that it doesn't want to access it later, you know. That's why a lot of times we suppress memories or we dissociate like out of body experience or forget a moment in time because the brain does not want to remember that. So it can be complicated, which is why if it's related to trauma, abuse, or intense experience, having a guidance of a therapist or a friend who has skills to help you process that emotions is very, very important, because if we're trying to recall that, emotions are going to come up, and we have to be armed with skills when that's happening, especially if there are risks of unsafe behaviors, right? Because remember that when we're hurt, our brain wants to escape, run away. And sometimes that's when suicidal thoughts can come up. The idea of just escaping from that pain is increases dopamine because it's a relief of pain, and brain wants dopamine. So a lot personally about when it comes to therapy and recalling these things, what I found is that there has to be a purpose in digging up these memories in therapy, because these memories will stir up emotions. Again, you have to have adequate coping skills. So, and that the memories, I believe, they have to be used to inform helpful ways on how to move on and how to be in the present. If we're digging up past, that information from the past has to help us now. It should be aimed towards emotional health, healing, positive outcomes, moving on, like really acknowledging your strengths and building that resilience so you can live your life, right now. I think when we do that, it should help us write our narrative in a way that is healthy, in a way that will set us free from that hurt, in a way that that past experience is not limiting us anymore. I think that it has to be used in a helpful way. And I want to emphasize that here, because I hear many times when I see individuals in my clinic, they're digging up all of these things, but then they just stay there in the digging up. And so what's happening is it's just re-traumatizing. There has to be a moving on process along with that.
Oh, I highly agree on that, because I think just drudging up the past and whatever that memory was that has a negative connotation, because obviously there are memories with positive and there are memories with negative. And I will share this with you and with our listeners, is that part of my coping skills is just not remembering what happened, the negative things that have happened, because I feel those things happen for a reason, and those memories or those things that happen were there to teach me a lesson. And it's not so much for me to feel like I'm a victim or like pity me, right? But those memories that were there, the bad memories that were there, they're there. But I have this coping mechanism of just like letting it go. And I think that's part of how I move forward, is that yes, these things happen. Yes, these were memories and experiences that I went through. However, for me, instead of me seeing it as I'm a victim or, woe is me, for me, I see it as, hey, it happened. It's a part of my history that cannot be erased. However, what am I going to learn from that particular moment? And I agree with you that, yes, when you dredge up the past, it does trigger these emotions. It triggers the memory of what happened during that moment and that time. And so it really does take a thick skin, I suppose, thick skin, or a sense of acknowledgement and a sense of it's okay that that happened, and like to move forward, And in any case, I feel that dredging up the past, or even having those memories, but whether it's good or bad, are just things to have at that moment, things that allow you to learn and just move forward. So I guess what I'm saying is we can't necessarily bring up the memories, like from the trauma, because it does take an extra sense of care when you do bring that up. Is that what you're trying to say?
That's one. Yeah. It's a process that needs to be done with care. When you were talking about the coping skill of, letting go, in order to let go of something, you have to have known that there was part of your past that had to be let go. So there had to be a recall that needed to happen, right? So we do have to. So in some situations, there might be this is like a hypothetical example. Let's say I'm always mean to my kids, right? And I'm realizing, man, I'm always mean to my kids. Why am I doing that? You know, why do I do that? It could be that there was a terrible part of my childhood that I have forgotten, or someone in my past from my childhood that had abused me, that is related to that. And so in that case, what if I wasn't aware of that, I could just be like doing this without knowing why, and I'm blaming myself and being hard on myself for it. And let's say I go to a therapist or realize after talking to someone that, you know, I think something happened when I was a child, you know, and then the therapy process had us remember, something that my brain has hidden at the very bottom of my memory chest box because it was such a painful experience. But then now that I become aware of that, of course, I'm going to be like all emotional and all that stuff about it. But with proper coping skills, I can realize that, okay, I can go through a healing process. When we say, let's process this, right? There's all these different steps. What do I need to do with that memory? Does it have to do with forgiveness? Does it have to do with letting out anger? Does it have to do with, all of that stuff, right? And then I have to relate what information can I get from that to apply to my life now and say, all right, I survived that, or I forgive that person, or I forgive myself for that. Okay. I don't have to be letting my anger out to my kids from that experience. That's I think that's an example of why it's helpful to go through a process of remembering those experiences so that I can live my life now as a mom that's not yelling at my kids, because now I've let go or moved on. But even that idea of letting go, right, it means different for different people. But I've moved on from that experience. I'm not allowing that to dictate my present now.
I think that's an exceptional answer to this question of, do we ever get our memories back if they're lost during trauma and or abuse? Which is, yes, it's possible, but what I'm hearing is it's safer and more sound with help, with professional help. So it's probably the best way or the better way to go if you plan or you'd like to bring back some of your memories that you want to explore. So excellent question. I do want to move on to our last question here, though, which is, are there no-brainer changes we can make to our diet to age with beauty and peace?
Yes, and then again, I wish I have magic answers that are like, revolutionary and everything. But when I was thinking about these questions, it's really the answer is just the essential reminders about healthy lifestyle. All the things we already know about, or maybe not know about, but we can search online and or on this podcast about is, one is proper nutrition, meaning your adequate fiber, protein, just the right amount of carbohydrates, and then our healthy fats. Our healthy fats are important, like your avocados and olive oils and all of those things. Because without those, if we are always eating, like, let's say, high carb foods or highly processed foods, which is correlated with brain health or poor brain health, if we are not avoiding those, they can lead to overall poor health and increase the risk of chronic conditions related to aging. Again, like our heart disease, diabetes, those kinds of conditions. Some of the other, specifically to when it comes to aging and beauty and skin, for example, there are certain vitamins that we want to incorporate in our diet. So those are vitamins A, C, D, E. They come in pills, but there is no replacement for, again, proper nutrition that we get from whole foods. So those vitamins can help us in looking youthful and overall health, those kinds of things. It helps with bone density and just general feelings of feeling mental health, like feeling well. Now, what's important too is we have to really be mindful about substance use, like alcohol and smoking. So yes, there are things that we can take, but there are also, more importantly, things that we have to avoid. For example, like if you just think of alcohol, um, alcohol and smoking, it causes dehydration. Yeah. It causes skin damage. Or if you look at before and after pictures of people who maybe have been chronic alcohol users or chronic smokers, and then they stop, yeah, um, you can see the difference in their skin because uh, these habits, like unhealthy habits, substance use, including smoking, they cause nutritional deficiencies. They accelerate our aging. They can cause damage to our internal organs, especially our liver. And our liver is a powerhouse. It metabolizes or breaks down the foods that we eat, the medications and supplements that we take. Also, when it comes to alcohol, talking about brain health, yeah, alcohol is directly related to cognitive decline. So there's a condition called alcoholic dementia. Right? So these substances can cause brain problems with our brain. So it's just best to moderate or avoid some of these substances. Let's see what else. Not a surprise, drinking enough water, which many people don't do enough. But our bodies, our cells are made up of water, just like the earth is made up of a lot of water. And so the best drink is not, your energy drink and all that stuff. Like I like those too, but there's no replacement for just plain old water. If you want a detox, rather than paying lots of money, you just you just make sure you hydrate well and you make sure your liver is doing its function. It's a detox powerhouse, your liver. Yeah. So we want to take care of that. Then, balance healthy eating patterns, healthy eating habits. I think on the mental health side, we have to be mindful about just positive self-perception when it comes to our body image, like not giving into the pressure of, I was thinking about this for the holidays, right? When we have gatherings with our family. And in some cultures, maybe in the Filipino culture, for example, just use that. There's all kinds of, there's always someone commenting about weight, and skin and wrinkles, all that stuff. I don't know why, but well, I know why. It's cultural stuff, but don't give in to those pressures. Really taking care of your mental health will help you have that self-acceptance and be mindful about your appropriate hunger cues, rather than giving into pressures of society, social media, family members during gatherings. So make sure that that positive body image is there, because that will help you have the better eating habits. It will help you get motivated to eat well and avoid substances. So again, it's a combination of the nutritional part, the proper diet, and then the lifestyle part and the mental health part.
Sorry, there was one more question that somebody asked, and I do want to, because it's correlated to what you just said, and it was about the effects of time spent on social media with aging. So how can, and I know that was a question that Mike mentioned. So what are the effects of that?
Yeah, let's see. Specifically with aging or the elderly population, there's actually one study that looked at the effects of social media on depression and anxiety. And what's surprising actually is that there's now this is not like the one study that says it all, but there are some findings that says it actually reduces depression and anxiety when you're connected with social media. And it makes sense because if you think of, we talked about isolation and loneliness, those are common issues in the aging population. With social media, if you're using it appropriately, right, can have you connected. So I think about grandparents who are in the Philippines, for example. They can see us and we can share pictures, we can connect, we can message online, and we feel like the technology is really bridging us. We're not so far away from each other. I see this all the time in my clinic, immigrant families who have their relatives and their parents and grandparents still in the Philippines, right? We always talk about how, oh yeah, we're video chatting. I saw them on Facebook or I saw them on Instagram. And so that enhances the sense of connectedness. At the same time, it's not definitive. The study also shows that if you take away the internet use or social media use, it doesn't necessarily make them, feel depressed, for example. It's not like a it's not like it's the only thing that will make you feel depressed. So the main thing is there's positive and negative, uh, depending on how you're using it. There's positive and negative effects on it. So we talked about cognitive stimulation and learning. So the great thing about social media is that even just for mental health, many people talk about mental health. So it's destigmatizing mental health. It could be a place for information. And that's empowering, right? When we have information. Plus, we're learning, so we're growing those cells. We're getting stimulated cognitively. At the same time, though, we have to have a critical mind when we're doing that because not all information is created equal, right? When someone says, "Oh, I have low energy," maybe it's I must be depressed because I have low energy. I saw it on TikTok, that is not true. Depression is just one possibility, but it could be like anemia, it could be a medical issue, it could just be dehydration. So again, a critical mind is important. So there are benefits. I think it's amazing to be connected as long as we're staying away from misinformation. Right? Your time is not being spent on like gathering misinformation, negative information. We can't just absorb negative information. It'll remember your environment impacts your emotional health. Yeah. We are influenced by the things that we take in. So be very careful with that. It could also be frustrating, for if you're not as tech savvy or if it's too complicated, right? So it's important to seek help, like to have someone teach you how to use social media properly so that it's fun rather than frustrating.
Wow, I really loved how you brought it into a more positive light because usually it's the negatives, 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 which yes, but you were like, there's also some positives, and the community is a huge one. That's actually why I don't love social media. I utilize social media a lot because I see the benefits of it. So I'm really glad you brought that up. Oh my God, so much, so many great takeaways. Gretchen, I love hearing you speak. I love hearing you talk. I love hearing you convey the message of taking care of our mental health because it has a trickle effect in everything. I'm a huge believer of feeding the mind, body, and soul. I believe that's the Trinity. I believe it's so sacred, and I believe they have to be at least in somewhat of a balance to be cared for us to live the most amazing life possible. And it's constant. It's like taking showers. I can't stay dirty for too long. I've got to shower, and that's how I feel about feeding my mind, body, and spirit. And I know when it's like if one of those are off, it has, again, a ripple effect. I'm going to fill it in all areas. It's like they all care for each other. My body, mind, and spirit are best friends. And if they lose one of them during like the day or the week, the rest of the besties are like, oh my God, we need to go in and help her. So I absolutely love this conversation. January or Gretchen, do you have any last words for today's episode?
Just thank you. Thank you, Gretchen, for being with us. I love that you are a resident psychiatrist on Sexy Freedom Media Podcast. I love that. And I love everything that you mentioned. I actually need to go back and take notes with everything that you said because I feel at this age, we really need to start our habits now so that we can prevent us from possibly getting dementia or, anything like heart disease and diabetes, all of these different things with everything that you mentioned. So start now in our 40s and continue that habit into our 80s and our 90s. So thank you very much for that. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you for having me here. There's a couple of points that I main messages, I guess. One is number one, the health has to be holistic, like what Helen said. You cannot separate your physical health from your mental health. There's not one exercise, one diet, one supplement that takes care of our brain, our beauty, our aging. We cannot improve our memory just by brain exercises. We can't age gracefully just by diet. We can't just focus on physical health. To be happy, we have to focus. We can't just focus on our mental health. It has to really be physiology, psychology, and what's around us. And then the second point is, I know we talked about a lot of details, but don't overcomplicate your health. You can start or maintain with just basic healthy lifestyle habits, regular exercise, don't be sedentary, walk, proper nutrition, don't smoke, have adequate sleep, like the things that we tell our kids, right? And then engage in cognitive or brain stimulation. If you want to do that, just go ahead and read or listen to this podcast. Taking care of our mental health. Just learn basic stress management and calming techniques. Start by catching and reframing negative self-talk, for example. Start a gratitude journal. Nurture your relationships, right? And these are not magic answers. There's an answer within you if you're just wondering, like, what can I start with?
With that said, thank you again to the listeners, especially to Librato Kano, Mike, Amadal, Michelle Weisgerber, and Rachel Cook for all of your questions. We appreciate you for engaging with us, with Dr. Gretchen and with Helen and I. So thank you. And we look forward to more questions from our listeners, because that's why we do this. We do this for you because we want to give you value. So Gretchen, where can we find you?
I'm at the underscore mental underscore path and thementalpath.com.
Helen, where can we find you?
Oh, yeah. Thank you for all the questions. We can't wait to hear more. You can find me, Hell of a Journey with 1L, Sexy Freedom Media. That's on Instagram, Facebook. You can Google me, Helen Edwards, but also write Nothing Sexier Than Freedom, and everything will just pop up and you'll learn my whole entire life. And don't forget to grab your copy of my famous book, Nothing Sexier Than Freedom, available on Amazon and Audible. January, where can we find you?
You can find me, January Liddell, on LinkedIn. You can also find me, januaryliddell.com, and that will have everything that is about me. You can also buy my book, Alina, The Super Saver. It's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble's, Walmart, any of those websites. You can also find me on Instagram, Anchored Financial LLC, and Facebook, Anchored Financial LLC. Looking forward to our next podcast. Thank you, everyone. Aloha.
I hear it.
Want to hear more?
Visit us at sexyfreedommedia.com.